My dear child, there are seasons in your life that feel confusing, heavy, and completely opposite of what you've been praying for. Seasons where instead of things coming together, they seem to be falling apart. Doors begin to close, plans don't work out, people walk away, and nothing feels stable anymore. And in those moments, your first thought is often, why is everything going wrong? But what you don't realize is that sometimes this is exactly what happens right before God is about to bless you. Because God does not always begin with addition. Many times, He begins with removal, not to punish you, not to delay you, but to prepare you. Because what He is about to bring into your life cannot fit into the space that is currently filled with what no longer belongs. And my dear child, this is the part that is hardest to accept. Because removal feels like loss. It feels like something is being taken away from you, something you valued, something you were comfortable with, something you thought was part of your future. And when it leaves, it creates a space that feels empty, uncertain, even painful. But listen carefully. Not everything that leaves your life is a loss. Sometimes it is a release, because God sees what you cannot see. He sees what is ahead. He sees what will grow, what will last, and what will only hold you back. And when something in your life is no longer aligned with where you are going, He begins to remove it. Not suddenly, not without warning, but gradually, in ways that your heart can begin to understand. And this is often the first sign. Things begin to fall apart, not all at once, but piece by piece. Relationships change, opportunities shift, situations that once felt stable begin to feel uncertain, and you try to hold it together. You try to fix it, to bring it back to how it was, but no matter how much effort you put in, it doesn't return to the same place. And that is where you must pause, because what God is removing, you cannot rebuild. And my dear child, this is where many people struggle. They spend so much time trying to restore what is breaking that they miss what is being prepared. They focus so much on what is leaving that they fail to see what is making space. Because before God adds something new, He clears what no longer fits. And yes, this process feels uncomfortable, because you are stepping into a space where things are not yet clear, where what you had is gone, but what is coming has not yet arrived. And that space, it can feel like nothing is happening, like you are stuck, like you are moving backward instead of forward. But this is not a place of loss. It is a place of preparation, because in that space, something is shifting inside you. Your mindset begins to change. Your awareness deepens. Your priorities become clearer. And even though you may not see immediate results, something within you is being aligned. And my dear child, this alignment is necessary, because the blessing that is coming is not just about what you receive. It is about who you become when you receive it. And if you are not prepared for it, you may not be able to sustain it. And that is why the process matters. Because God is not only preparing what is coming to you, He is preparing you for what is coming. And this is why things sometimes feel slower than you expect, why the timing does not match your plan, why the path feels uncertain. Because preparation is happening in ways you cannot see. And yes, there will be moments when you question it, when you feel like nothing is moving, when you wonder if you are being delayed or overlooked. But you must remember this: delay is not denial, because what God is preparing is not rushed. It is intentional. It is built in a way that will last. And my dear child, before every blessing there is a process, and that process often begins with removal, with discomfort, with uncertainty. Not because something is wrong, but because something is being made right. So instead of focusing on what is falling apart, begin to ask yourself, what is being cleared? What is being shifted? What is being prepared? Because when you begin to see it that way, everything changes. You stop resisting the process. You stop trying to hold on to what is leaving. You stop fearing the space that has been created. And you begin to trust, because you understand that what is happening right now is not the end of something. It is the beginning of something greater. And the more you trust that, the more you will be able to move through this season with peace instead of confusion, with faith instead of fear. Because what feels like everything falling apart may actually be everything coming into place. And that, my dear child, is something you should never overlook. My dear child, once the process of removal begins, there is something else that follows. Something even more difficult to understand, because after things fall apart, there is often a season where nothing seems to come together. A quiet, empty space where what you had is gone, and what you've been praying for has not yet arrived. And this is where your faith is tested the most. Not when things are happening, but when nothing seems to be happening at all. Because in this season, it can feel like you are stuck, like your life has paused, like everyone else is moving, forward while you are standing still, and your first instinct is to question it, to wonder if you made a mistake, if you missed something, if maybe you are being delayed. But listen carefully, this stillness is not a delay. It is a preparation ground. Because after God removes what no longer belongs, He does not immediately replace it. He allows a space to remain, not to confuse you, but to develop you. And my dear child, this is where many people struggle, because they are uncomfortable with emptiness. They rush to fill the space with anything that feels familiar. They go back to what was, or they settle for something less, just to avoid the feeling of uncertainty. But that emptiness is not something to escape. It is something to honor, because in that space something powerful is happening. Your dependence begins to shift, your priorities begin to realign, your understanding deepens, and slowly, without you even realizing it, you begin to change. Because the blessing that is coming into your life is not just about receiving something new. It is about stepping into a new version of yourself. And if that transformation does not happen first, the blessing may not last. And this is why the waiting feels so intense, because you are in between who you were and who you are becoming. And that space, it can feel uncomfortable, unfamiliar, even lonely, but it is necessary, because God is not only preparing what is coming to you, He is preparing you to handle it. And my dear child, there is something else you must recognize in this season. Your strength is being built, not the kind of strength that comes from control, but the kind that comes from trust. Because when you cannot see what is ahead, when you cannot predict what is coming, when everything feels uncertain, and you still choose to remain steady, that is where real strength is formed. And this is why this season feels quiet, because growth does not always happen in loud moments. It happens in silence, in patience, in stillness. And yes, there will be moments when you feel like going back, when you miss what was familiar, when you question if you should have held on longer. But you must remind yourself, what was removed could not carry you into what is coming. And going back will only take you further away from where you are meant to be. And my dear child, this is where trust becomes your foundation. Not trust in what you can see, but trust in what you cannot yet see. Because what is being prepared for you is not something temporary. It is something aligned, something stable, something that will not require you to constantly struggle to keep it. And that kind of blessing, it requires time, it requires alignment, it requires preparation. So instead of rushing the process, learn to stay in it instead of fearing the silence. Learn to grow in it instead of trying to control the outcome. Learn to trust the direction. Because what feels like nothing is happening is actually everything being arranged. And one day, when things begin to come together, when opportunities align, when the right people enter your life, when everything starts to make sense, you will look back at this quiet season differently. You will realize that it was not empty, it was not wasted, it was not a delay. It was the very place where you were being prepared for what was always meant for you. So stay steady, my dear child, even in the stillness. Because just because you cannot see what is forming does not mean nothing is being built. And what is being built right now is something that will not fall apart the way the past did. And that is something worth waiting for, my dear child. After the removal, after the silence, after the waiting, there comes a moment where everything begins to shift again, but not in the way you expect. Not suddenly, not all at once, but quietly, steadily, in a way that only makes sense when you look back. Because when God is getting ready to bless you, the final thing He does is align everything you could never align on your own. And this is where many people miss it, because they are still looking at what they lost, still focused on what didn't work, still holding on to the past. And because of that, they fail to recognize what is now beginning to come together. Because alignment does not always look dramatic. It looks simple, natural, almost effortless. Suddenly, the right opportunities begin to appear. The right people begin to enter your life. The things that once felt confusing begin to feel clear. And you don't have to force it. You don't have to chase it. You don't have to fight for it. It flows. And my dear child, this is how you know difference. What was not meant for you required constant effort to hold together. What is meant for you comes together with alignment. And this does not mean there will be no effort, but it will not feel like a constant struggle. It will feel like progress, like movement, like something building, instead of breaking. And this is why the process had to happen first. Because if this alignment came before the removal, you would not have been ready to receive it. You might have held on to the past while trying to step into the future. You might have confused what is right with what is familiar. You might have missed what was truly meant for you. And that is why everything had to be cleared. Everything had to slow down. Everything had to shift so that when this moment came, you would see it clearly. And my dear child, there is something else you must understand. When God aligns things, it will not confuse you. You will not feel like you are guessing where you stand. You will not feel like you're forcing something to work. You will not feel like you are losing yourself to keep it. Instead, there will be a sense of peace. Not because everything is perfect, but because everything fits, and this peace, it is different. It does not come from excitement alone. It comes from clarity, from stability, from knowing that you are no longer trying to make something happen. You are simply stepping into what has already been prepared. And my dear child, this is where gratitude begins to replace confusion. Because you start to see why things didn't work before. You start to understand why certain people had to leave. You start to realize why the waiting was necessary. Because if those things had stayed, this would not have happened. And suddenly, what once felt like loss begins to feel like direction. And this is the moment where your perspective changes completely. You no longer look back with regret. You no longer question why things fell apart. You no longer wish for what used to be. Because you can finally see it was all leading you here. And my dear child, this is the beauty of God's timing. It does not always make sense in the moment. It does not always feel easy. It does not always match your expectations. But when everything comes together, you realize it was always right. And this is why you must trust the process, even when you don't understand it. Because what God is building is not temporary. It is not unstable. It is not something that will fall apart the way the past did. It is something that will grow, something that will last, something that will align with who you are becoming. So when things begin to come together, do not question it out of fear. Do not hold back because of past experiences. Do not doubt what is finally clear. Instead, step into it with confidence. Because you are not stepping into something random. You are stepping into something that has been prepared through every moment you have already walked through. And my dear child, this is how you will know. Not through pressure, not through confusion, not through struggle, but through peace, clarity, and alignment. And when you feel that, you will understand that everything you went through before was not breaking you, it was positioning you for the blessing that was always on its way. My dear child, now that you have seen the removal, the waiting, and the alignment, there is one final truth you must understand. Because this is where the blessing is no longer something you are waiting for. It becomes something you are living in. Because when God finally brings everything together, the greatest change is not around you. It is within you. You are no longer the same person who was holding on to what was falling apart. You are no longer the same person who was anxious in the waiting. You are no longer the same person who doubted in the silence. Something inside you has shifted. And this shift, this transformation, is the true foundation of the blessing. Because blessings' lines are not just about what you receive, they are about who you become when you receive it. And my dear child, this is why the process was necessary. Because if you had received what you wanted before you were ready, you might have mishandled it. You might have taken it for granted. You might have lost it the same way you lost what came before. But now, you see differently. You recognize the value of peace. You understand the importance of alignment. You no longer chase what confuses you. And because of that, you are able to hold on to what is right, without fear, without pressure. And this is where many people miss the final step. Because even when the blessing arrives, they carry the mindset of the past. They expect things to fall apart again. They question what is clear. They hold back instead of stepping fully into what has been given. And in doing so, they limit what they were meant to experience. But my dear child, you must not do that. Because what God has brought into your life now is not like what came before. It does not require constant effort just to survive. It does not leave you feeling uncertain. It does not pull you away from your peace. Instead, it supports you. It strengthens you. It aligns with you. And this is where trust becomes deeper. Not just trusting God during the process, but trusting what He has now placed in front of you. Because it is one thing to trust Him when nothing is happening. It is another thing, trust Him when everything finally begins to come together. And my dear child, you must also learn this. Blessing is not just about receiving something once. It is about maintaining it, growing it, nurturing it. Because what is given to you now requires your awareness, your gratitude, consistency, not in fear of losing it, but in understanding its value. And this is where your mindset matters. Because if you remain grounded, if you remain aware, if you continue to trust, what has been built will continue to grow. But if you return to old patterns, old fears, old habits, you may begin to create the same instability that once existed. And that is why your transformation is the most important part of the blessing. Because the external can only remain stable if the internal is steady. And my dear child, this is the final realization. Everything you went through, confusion, the loss, the waiting, the silence, it was never just about getting you to something. It was about preparing you for it. And now that you are here, do not look back with regret. Do not question why things had to happen the way they did. Because without that process, this moment would not exist. And the peace you feel now, the clarity you have now, the alignment you are stepping into now, is the result of everything you once struggled to understand. So step into this season fully, without fear, without hesitation, without holding back. Because you are not stepping into something uncertain. You are stepping into something that has been prepared for you. And when you trust that, when you embrace it completely, you will finally understand that the blessing was never just about what you were waiting for. It was about who you were becoming along the way. And now, my dear child, you are ready.